Hello, Laurent.
Hello,
Nice to
Fred.
see you again.
Yeah, thanks
Uh,
for having
how
me.
are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
Cool.
We're going to Lisbon next week, so uh,
Oh,
it's going to be great.
that's always good.
Yeah.
Nice. So, Laurent, thank you for being here first. We are here to speak about how we got to collaborate together, AxonIQ and Locala, formerly S4M, if I'm not mistaken, Laurent.
Yeah,
Right? Locala. So S4M became Locala, right?
we rebranded in March
Okay.
2022. Yeah.
Okay. So what I propose first, Laurent, is I introduce myself and who is AxonIQ and what we do. Then you can follow. What do you think? Good?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So I'm Frédéric Gendebien, obviously French speaker. I've been working in IT for 12 years now. Specialized in DDD CQRS event sourcing for, like, if I'm not mistaken, 7 or 6 years. I did several times my own frameworks in several languages, and then I actually stopped because I was looking up a bit what existed already for JVM, and I fell in love with the AxonIQ product. I used them in my in one of my customer, and yeah, I had contact with AxonIQ, and I finally joined AxonIQ a few months ago and became really part of the company. Who is AxonIQ? AxonIQ is obviously a company specialized in DDD security and sourcing. Actually, our CTO, Alain Beuze, created the framework 12 years ago, a framework just to facilitate the implementation of DDD, CQRS, and even sourcing. At first, it was a framework, and then we decided to create a server as well. Why a server? Basically, the framework is about abstraction of components like command bus, query bus, even store, aggregated repository, everything that is needed for DDD. And the server is actually facilitates the message routing between the application. And of course, the router is something that can scale horizontally. So really facilitates, and you have a plug and play between the framework and the server. So really recently, we also created the cloud product. So it's basically a server in the cloud managed for you. So very nice products. So in a nutshell, yeah, this is who we are. I propose Laurent explain who you are and explain who is Locala.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Laurent Thoulon. I've been working in this company since 2011. Well, actually not exactly this company, because I was in a company that was bought by Locala. I was in the beginning just a PHP developer, working on say full stack applications, if we could call this like that back then. And well, the, let's say, changes in the company brought me to working more on backend oriented application and Java. And I've been working since then mostly with this technology. So today at Locala, I'm a senior lead engineer. I like to call myself holistic engineer. It's actually a term I discovered not so long ago, because, well, it matches with my vision of what we should be doing, not only considering the piece of technology we are working on, but the context in which it evolves, and also the business that is around it, that is quite important. And well, this, let's say, meets the DDD criterias, where, well, you really want to have the whole of the business to work with. So
Nice.
yeah, and well, mostly I'm a backend engineer and an architect. As I said, I work mostly with Java. And I've been like developing marketing-oriented applications since I started in 2011. And I started working with event sourcing CQRS DDD in 2017 when my previous company was bought by Locala. And since then, well, we've like evolved around this. In 2020, the company decided to start working on a new product that would be drive to store oriented, which is currently the focus for Locala. The point of the company is really to focus on driving customers to stores and providing well, our clients with high value insights on their venues and their markets.
Okay. Cool.
So yeah, and to do this, like we started using Axon in 2020 as a replacement for our previous architecture. Well,
so it's been 2 years already that
so
you're
yeah,
using Axon.
it's been 2 years I've been using Axon, and I like finally feel, you know,
comfortable.
Yeah, comfortable with it, and yeah,
Okay.
there's been a huge challenge, but yeah, we're only talking about this.
Okay, very interesting. So I propose you explain in a bit what are you using in Axon, what kind of products, and what is your architecture, very briefly, and then we will go back in time and look what you did in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 17, and we explain. Yeah, I would like to see how you got there, actually.
Okay.
So, what is your current architecture, Laurent?
We have multiple applications working together, divided in let's say multiple domains. We have like our main application that supports the Locala product, which interacts with other smaller applications for which each of these have their own responsibility.
Is it in a monolith, or is it in multiple small applications that you're using the framework already?
Yeah, we're using multiple smaller applications. We actually have well, our first Axon application is a single app containing multiple domains, mostly due to the fact that we started with this. It was like the easiest thing to do. But now we have also two other applications that have their own domain of responsibility, which are also working with Axon Framework. And we're using Axon Server, obviously, for the ease that it brings in terms of like communication between the various applications.
Cool. So yeah, if you're using Axon Framework and the server, it means you are really using the DDD, CQRS, and even sourcing approach, I guess, in your current architecture.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, we completely embraced this since 2017, and we like pushed it one step further when let's say resuming in 2020.
Yeah, cool. So I actually would like to understand this. So go back to 2017. How did you get started with CQRS, even sourcing? What was the first approach? Did you try to do it yourself? Did you use another framework? Can you just explain to us?
Yeah, well, first I think it's interesting to know why did we choose to go this way?
Yeah, indeed.
Because basically we are coming from, let's say, a monolith application style way of doing things, and yeah, like experience told us that those kind of applications were harder and harder to maintain and were costing us more and more to maintain. So we wanted something that would allow us to be more maintainable, scalable, and guarantee some evolvability on the long term. Even if this means like embracing the complexity of what we wanted to do. So at that point, like event sourcing seemed the right thing to do because it would allow us to go to the the smaller grain that we needed to be able to control everything we wanted to do.
So by using even sourcing, you mean your application can evolve in any direction that you cannot think about right now?
Yeah,
right?
It's actually the combination of event sourcing with the DDD, etc., that is bringing this, because it allows us to work on a mutation level. Each time something happens, you can react to it. You can decide to react to it and build something around this. And so it's quite, as in event sourcing, your events, what happened at some point, is your source of truth. When you try to build something around this, well, tomorrow you can remove it and replace it by something else by just rereading this source of events.
Yeah, indeed. So it's interesting we are mentioning even sourcing already. Imagine that people who are listening to this video, they don't know about even sourcing. What would be the explanation from your point of view about even sourcing? Try the most simple explanation you could give.
Well, for me, it's really about, the most simple would be like just storing the events as a source of truth. And then there is everything about, being able to trigger side effects based on this event to, let's say, feedback the event sourcing itself. And there is this whole part around, you're capturing each detail of a domain. So you can create a projection of this, like an aggregation, what we are used to see in a relational database. You can create a projection like this, and you can recreate it as many times as you want, like fixing it or creating something new. And that's quite easy to do because you just have to reread the events in the way you want to read them to create whatever you want behind it.
So can we say that we can see there are two different things in even sourcing, right? Is when people are, most of the time, people mixing things with even streaming and even sourcing, right?
Yeah.
Can you just explain a bit the difference between even streaming and even sourcing?
Well,
in few words.
Event streaming is part of event sourcing because it's just about like streaming the events and doing whatever you want with it. With event sourcing, it's actually a source of truth. So it's what I said earlier. For me, it's really the ability to base yourself on that and be able to reread it constantly. And the fact that it's something that is going to evolve based on itself, like you're going to have event handlers that can either create a projection or that can just react to a specific event, send a new command to generate another event, maybe. Meanwhile, doing something else, maybe on a third-party system.
Yeah, so what we see is, indeed, even streaming is like pushing information towards event handlers, let's say, in a very efficient way, and the event handlers do whatever they want with the notification, with the event. It could be like re-aggregating information to create another stream, or writing to a database to create a projection, or like you said, putting something into a process manager. This is really the streaming part. And in even sourcing, we see that actually you're storing, like you said, everything that happened in your system in what we call event, which is something that represents a change in the system, right? And based on that, on those changes, you can actually, and a lot of people forget about this, but with the history of a specific aggregate, which is written in the log of events, you can actually rebuild your aggregate state and take decision based on that state. And that's why other products, for instance, than the Axon product, you can't do this with other products, like really driving your aggregate and take a decision based on that. And this is the two parts for me of even sourcing, taking a decision based on what happened already, and then rebuilding, being able to rebuild your query model, right?
Yeah.
So very interesting way. Thank you for this, Laurent. So that was the explanation of even sourcing. Now, how did you get there in 2017? You experimented yourself with even sourcing. Could you a bit explain
how
you did this?
Well, yeah, we created our own event sourced application. Back then, we didn't know about any framework that existed. I think actually Axon was in its beginnings, but we didn't know about it. So we started building our own solution based on some pure Java code and using Kafka in the middle to store events. And we were actually doing two things back then. We were doing command sourcing and event sourcing. We had this system where we would have like a command source that would be read by a command handler. Itself would write the events to the event source, and then we could have some event aggregators, as we called them back then, that would read this source and create like already projections, aggregated versions of the aggregates themselves to project them in a database.
Yeah, interesting. And how from the command, you said it was command source, so you were pushing the commands towards Kafka, I guess. How would you rehydrate your aggregate state to take the decision and create the event? How did you do that with Kafka actually? Did you have a database on the site which contained the state of the aggregate?
Well, actually, we didn't go up to that part. I mean, back then it was really straightforward. We weren't doing any rehydrating or whatsoever. We were just really having a command, write an event, reading the event, aggregating them. But we didn't really go up to the point where we could use the power that event sourcing brings us. We had like the system, we could like maybe at some point plug things in there, but we reached kind of a limit where we wouldn't know really how to rehydrate, how to reuse those events to build maybe something else without maybe creating some issues regarding the consistency of the data. Like, am I sure that I'm in a proper state to execute this new command? Maybe something else changed the state in between, and we didn't have any system to do this. And this is kind of where we left the application. It's actually still running in production and still working. We barely had any issues since then with it. But yeah, we left it in that state.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, you're not rebuilding your aggregate to take a decision. You just receive a command, do something with it.
Yeah.
And you actually pray for its consistency and then create an event. Right? Yeah. And this is where maybe the difference between Kafka and the Axon product is Kafka is good at streaming, right? It's really a streaming platform. But to rehydrate the aggregate state and take a decision, this is not really the use case of Kafka. So that's probably leading to why did you decide to switch back to other products? Can you explain? Maybe that was the trigger to go for AxonIQ products.
In 2020, like we decided to let's say start working on that new product, and we were convinced that our ideas from 2017 were the good ones. Like, even if we weren't able to push this up till the point where we were completely satisfied with it. However, in 2017, we didn't have any tool to work with. But in 2020, we had learned about Axon Framework, and while rapidly testing it, we immediately saw the power it would bring to our development. Like every technical question that we had and we weren't able to answer in 2017 was like already answered there and quite easily integrated with Spring Boot. We just had some annotations to put here and there to create our events and our commands. So the idea at that point was that, well, the mindset in which we were is that, okay, we are really here going to be able to focus on the business logic and less on the technical part. Well, it ends up that you still have to understand a bit of the technical parts, but we didn't know this back then. However, it was still today. I still think it was the right choice.
Cool. So if I understand correctly, you decided to use the framework, and when you actually know the concept already, because DDD CQRS even sourcing is not something easy to understand. When you understood it, we can say that it is quite easy actually, but to understand it, it's not easy. And when you understand the concept, what you were saying, if I'm not mistaken, Laurent, is that using the framework really facilitates putting everything in place. And if you understand the framework, you understand the concept, and you're already using Java and Spring Boot and all the Java ecosystem, then you can really focus on writing business.
Yeah,
right?
Indeed.
Can we say this is the benefit of the framework, is to focus on business instead of focusing on what is the technical configuration that I have to put? Maybe, of course, we still have configuration, of course, but the framework is not 100% plug and play to your application. Of course, you need to specify some things. But is this really a big configuration that you have to do?
It's not a big configuration. It's just something you have to be acquainted for. It was actually also the first time that we were using Spring Boot in such an advanced way. So I guess this also got mixed up with the fact that we were launching ourselves with Axon Framework.
Yeah, I would say personally, if you already know Java, Spring Boot, putting and the concepts, of course, the CQRS even sourcing, from my personal point of view, the framework is quite easy. But it's true that if you need to learn a concept and never play with Spring Boot or a bit, that's a lot of things to learn. Yeah. Indeed. And then, okay, so that's for the framework. And when did you decide to use the server, and why? What are the benefits of using the server or not the server, actually?
Well, we really started right away with the server because I mean we needed to have some way to have our event storage, and quite rapidly, we were going to need to handle multiple contexts. So we started with the community edition to play with it and start learning Axon. But we rapidly switched to the enterprise edition to benefit from the multi-context aspects and everything it brings. I mean, I'm not even sure how we could work without the server, because if you only have the framework and you want some kind of distributed application, well, at some point you need your commands to be able to go from one application to another, and this is what the server brings. It's going to make sure that your command that you send at some point goes to whatever server knows how to handle it, and it's going to make sure also your events are readable from wherever you are on the planet, whatever application you're in.
Yeah, that's actually indeed, that's what brings the server. Because for the one who are watching and don't know about the products so the framework, like I said, is really abstracting all the components. and offering some default implementation like in-memory implementation, like Postgres SQL implementation for the store, Mongo as well. And but unfortunately, like you said, if you want to have distributed application, you need to have distributed commandos. And we have actually an implementation for this based on JGroups, but it's not that easy to put in place because actually of JGroups. JGroups is not really, you need to understand how it works. And the configuration could be something big. And the same for the queries, actually. The same for the queries. You need, if you want to have like very advanced systems where you can actually ask for data and you have multiple sources of data, the framework offers what we call the query scattering and gathering features, which is very nice. You have, for instance, an old system, a new system, and one other system is asking for information. The framework would say, okay, I know that there are many query handlers. I will ask both systems and I will put all the answers together and give you back the answers. So it's very interesting. Unfortunately, there is no distributed implementation that comes with the framework. And that's why we created actually the server. And this is the benefit of the server, is that in one component, which is distributed, of course, you can have all the message routing in one place. So you can really embrace the location transparency and say, I don't know who you are and who is handling the command. I just need to put that command into the system.
Yeah.
And the same for queries, the same for events. I need that event. I don't know what is the source, but I just need that event. And the framework, the server is really gluing things together.
I think one thing that is interesting here that you're talking about also, which is not actually part of whatever is event sourcing, is the query part, because the queries are just something I feel like you're leveraging from the technology that is there. The technology allows you to easily do a query and get a response for that query. This is not directly linked to event sourcing, but it works in the same way as commands and events.
Mm-hmm. But that's interesting that you're mentioning this, because event sourcing is a pattern, and for me it's an amazing pattern. I cannot, as a developer and honest developer, I always use event sourcing because of the simplicity it brings to me afterwards. But one thing I discovered with Axon was actually the query part of it. And it's not linked to event sourcing, it's true, but it's linked with CQRS, actually, and how to distribute an application. If you remember the reactive manifesto, really at the end, it says message driven. It's not saying event driven, say message driven. What are the message? Because we say all the time, we speak about event driven. Events are the magical things. But actually, we forget about command and queries and events. Those are the messages.
Yeah.
And this is why, the products of AxonIQ are a bit different from other products, which are really sometimes only focusing on event streaming, event routing, but they forget about the command and the queries. And we really take the manifest and try to implement what's in it, actually, and really try to help people. Yeah. So indeed, the queries for me are a very, very important part of the features of the server. And many people, I don't know if you're using the distributed queries, so query subscription or scattering, gathering.
No, we're not using scattering, gathering. However, we are using subscription queries, yes, cool. Which allows us to.
Can you explain to people what it is? Because maybe they don't know what it is.
Yeah, well, it's a query that is kind of going to be staying alive. So whenever you have a new event that arrives, you can do, well, obviously whatever you want with it inside the projection, the state you're building, and you can forward that mutation that happened to whoever is listening to that query. Yeah. This allows us to, like, for instance, have something that leaves the front end from the mutation part of things, the command part of things, and then at some point it's listening to the changes that are going to arrive, and so it does the whole loop going through the server, etc., and through those subscription queries, we can feed them back through a WebSocket to the front end.
WebSocket. That was my idea. Is like you can easily bridge the query subscription with a WebSocket channel. I personally use gRPC channels and use subscription queries to feed my gRPC two-way communication. And yeah, for me, it was really interesting because it's very easy to put in place. Comparing to other products, it's really, that's my feeling. I don't know if you have the same feeling.
Yeah, it was quite easy. It wasn't natural though in the beginning, but as everything in event sourcing needs a change of mindset compared to what we used to work with. But once you're used to working with it, it's actually quite easy to put in place. It doesn't require a lot of code.
Yeah, that's the very nice part. Can we mention some some bottlenecks, some hiccups that you had while putting in place the DDD CQRS event sourcing philosophy in your new application? What was the different very pain points? Let's say, was it human side? It could be human, it could be technical, just things.
Yeah, well, obviously, as I just said, there was the mindset change. I mean, I actually started working with event sourcing in 2017, so it was easier. I'm not going to say easy, but easier for me to adapt. It took a bit more time for some other people inside my team. So yeah, getting to the right mindset, and I feel like, as I was saying earlier, I feel like it's only after 2 years that I feel at ease with the whole mindset and the technology and like everything. When I ask questions today to the Axon team, it's more to validate an approach rather than needing an actual answer. And more I see that I actually already have the answer and I can fine tune it with the help of the AxonIQ team.
That's very interesting answer, Laurent. So you say that the mindset is important, and you doesn't grasp all the details by yourself in 2 days. You really need to understand.
You need to understand DDD. You need to understand CQRS. You need to understand what an event actually is, and this can vary a bit also depending on what you're building and your approach. And I think one of the other things that maybe we didn't grasp at the start was what projections actually should be. We kept our old habits, our old monolithic habits. Like we have events where we are going to aggregate them to a projection that is going to be a relational database representation of those events. And then we're just going to put queries in front of this, and we are going to expose this to the front end. Well, this actually kind of beats the point, and you're generating coupling inside your database for all your front-end features, where I think the power of event sourcing here is to allow you to duplicate your states, and actually not exactly duplicate, because you're going to fine-tune each state, each projection for the need of a specific front-end. And this, like we learned maybe it's not that we learned it, but it became clear only about 6 months ago that this is what we should be doing.
Yeah, indeed. And that's a very important thing, because as a trainer myself, that's the most difficult part to explain is when you do. So when people are reading DDD, they say, okay, I understand everything about aggregate root entities, value object, perfect. And then they try to actually use CQRS, but they don't understand what is the specialties of CQRS with DDD. It's like you have now two kind of models, the write model and the query models with S, multiple query models. And a lot of people are trying to put as much information as possible in the aggregate as well. So they want to keep everything in the aggregate, and they want to create, like you said, a query, systematically a query for the aggregate, which is a bit weird. And like you said, it's really old habits of the cut monolithic approach. And it's very difficult to explain to people that what you put in the aggregate is what I personally call the validation model. This is a model, like you said, tailor-made, like everything, like projection models. The aggregate in itself is also a projection of your event, because you only need to keep what is interesting for validating and creating the events, and that's it. And some people have really trouble to understand this and I understand because it's a total mind shift. But yeah, that's a very interesting point.
Yeah, well, it's actually two different things. That there is really the projection part, where we were like only creating a single projection, but indeed there is also this aggregate part. And another interesting fact about the aggregate part, where indeed at some point we were like trying to put everything in the aggregate even when it wasn't useful. There is also the question of should you be using different aggregates, or should you be using at some point maybe an aggregate root that is going to have multiple aggregate members. And this is also something that we had to change. Let's say in the beginning, we started with multiple aggregates, and then we saw it was rapidly quite complex to make them interact with each other, especially since they had a lot of interaction, because it was like a main entity with its child entity. And so everything was about the interaction between the main entity and the child entity. So at first, by having two different aggregates, we were having a lot of process managers in the middle to like handle the interactions, and it can become very complex in terms of events for these, and in terms of state that you need to keep, etc. And at some point, while talking with the AxonIQ team, we saw that, well, a good other option would be to create an aggregate root and have aggregate members. And we didn't know what that meant back then. But once this was set up, well, everything was easier, because from your aggregate root, you could directly affect your aggregate members, and you didn't have to have all those process managers in the middle. Yeah. So it reduced considerably the number of commands and the number of events that we had to handle.
Yeah, so again, this is a nice explanation of how and why, certainly why we should understand the concept DDD. Very important, because indeed, what is an aggregate is very important to understand what are the entities, and why do we have multiple entities within an aggregate, and what is the role of the aggregate root. So something really important to know, because otherwise, yes, you could end up with some design which are not really easy to make evolve, and even the simplest thing could become very complex. And if you just rearrange, put actually the same responsibility within the same aggregate, it can become very, very simple. Yeah. So that's about design, right?
Talking
it's
about
really about the design.
Talking about the design and having your events evolve. That this is, let's say, kind of our latest challenge. I mean, like we went through the honeymoon phase, as people like to call it, and then we were in production, and we were like, okay, but now I need to have everything evolve in a non-breaking way. how do I do that with my events, with my logic, etc.? And this was kind of a challenge. But I mean, as we were kind of used to working with Axon now, we quite rapidly converged to the right solution. And it was actually very close to what we were doing with our data streams. For instance, we are using Avro, and when you have an Avro model evolve, or even a protobuf model, you need to make sure that you're backward and forward compatible. Well, that's the same thing that you need to do with events. You need to make sure that when you do when you create like a new feature, maybe you want to add some field. Well, you need to ask yourself, how am I going to affect my events? What does it mean for the handlers that are currently reading them? And make sure that things are not going to break here. And here again, it's all about understanding the concepts, and because there is not one answer to this, like there are multiple answers.
Exactly.
And one of the answers is actually provided by the Axon Framework. It's the upcasters that allows you to mutate an event, let's say, at the time it's being read. So of course it has its limitations because, well, you cannot use some I/O to, I don't know, go fetch some data somewhere else and feed it to your event. But it is a possibility that is nice when at some point you fail to bring some other principles that would facilitate your migration. There is always this solution there.
So just to fade a bit on the upcasters. The upcasters comes when actually you broke your event, right? And you say, I have to break my event, which is basically, from my own perspective, you should always try not to break, like you said. And I always manage to deal with evolving my model without breaking. Only once I broke my events because actually I didn't understand the business correctly back then. And I said, yeah, okay, the model is not correct. I need to change the event because I put an information that it was outside of the scope of the event. So I said, I want to remove it. Okay, it will break, but whatever. Sometimes it happens. And when you broke your event, you have something that you call, it's part of the framework, an upcaster. And this is actually a way to, not to kill yourself, but say, oh, damn, I broke my model. What do I do? No, we offer a solution to, you already have written the event in the history, so you cannot update the history. And that's the principle of even stored. You never update history. But as the event stored is as a representation that it's not correct anymore, let's say, you have a possibility to map it to something else when you read it. And that's a very interesting feature. But again, my personal opinion, use it when you need.
Yeah,
really
we actually don't have any upcasters currently. Well, we have one because we wanted to test the technology, but we could actually remove it because since then, it was before we went to production that we built it to know the technology, and we could remove it.
So that's very nice. So maybe it could be a tips to say, okay, casters are really the last resort possibility, but try not to break your system. And maybe another tips and tricks to avoid breaking the system. Could you give some? I have one, but it could be interesting to have.
Well, what I tend to do generally is maybe to, rather than altering an event, create a new one, you know. It really depends on the evolution you're doing to that event. If what you're adding is optional, well, obviously you can alter your event and add that optional field. But if it's not, I always try to think about, okay, would it make sense to create another event? For instance, if I have, I don't know, some kind of application that just allows you to create some things, the command to create, I don't know, whatever object is going to have a certain number of fields. If you want to add a field to this, Well, you have two ways of doing this. Obviously, your command can contain all the fields always, but your events that contains the first fields, maybe you will want to create a new event that will just handle that new field. And to go further than this, I tend to split fields even at the beginning. Like, I'm going to allow my client to have a big command that contains all the fields because that's easier for him. However, for us, it's better that we split this and add maybe as many events as we have fields, because tomorrow when you want to have like a specific field evolve and change, then you just have to reuse that event. And it's really easier than from an event handling point of view to just listen to the only event you're interested in and not have multiple events alter the same field, because then you don't know what to do.
Exactly. Damn, this is exactly my tip. No, I have nothing to say. Perfect. It's actually exactly my technique. And I have another example, a simple one. Maybe it's interesting as well. The account. I'm always playing with accounts. I like the financial area. And imagine when you create an account, just a balance at first, and a number and a balance, and you do everything. And you can withdraw, you can deposit. But the business comes back to you and say, but now we would like to add the credit limit. It's always something, add the credit limit at the creation of the account. Okay. A bad design would be to put the credit limit in the event that already exists, like new account registered or new account created. I don't like the created part, but I prefer registered. It would be bad for me to do that. And what I just did was I created, like you said, a new event with a credit limit has been added to the account. And then I have two new events. I don't break my model. And like you said, if I want to keep track of the credit limit, I can do an event handler that is coping with the credit limit. If I don't want to, I don't have to change. And that's very, very nice. So it's a very good tip.
Yeah, and that leads me maybe to another tip is make sure that your namings in the beginning are the right ones, because you don't want to have to change the names. And that means that actually means having discussions about how you name things. And like, I know a lot of people laugh about this. It's always known as one of the hardest challenges for a developer. It's about like naming things, but you need to talk with your business about what something actually is. And that's part of DDD. That's part of the ubiquitous language that is around this. You need to have this discussion, because when your team is going to evolve, people are going to come and go. Your application is going to live on the long term. If you put the right terms inside your application, then any developer talking with anyone from your business or your selling team whatsoever will be using the same terms. And this is actually quite important for your team for evolving, etc.
I would say it's one of the most important thing, to talk the same language and have a very nice naming convention. And talking about naming convention, I would personally try to avoid created, updated, and deleted at the end of the event. Because I remember back in the days, I don't need to mention which company, of course, but I was coping with appointments. That was the aggregate. And we had only created and updated. It's actually very bad, because what happened in the updated? Appointment updated. You don't know what happened. It could be rescheduled. It could be you added a new invitee, or you removed an invitee, or you canceled it. Or see all the things you can do with an appointment. Back in the days, we had only updated. And I was like, it doesn't make sense. But it's because of the CRUD philosophy was so deep in the mind of the designers. It was very, very difficult to remodel the things correctly. And with statistics. Imagine you do a model that brings statistics, say how many times did we cancel an appointment, for instance. How do you do that with updated? It's almost impossible.
Well, in 2017, we tried to not use created and updated. And at some point I just said, let's just use created and updated, because we didn't have the right mindset, and we were actually doing creation, updates and deletes. So we were doing CRUD using this a version of event streaming, of event sourcing that we had, which was actually probably event streaming only. Nowadays we are much more trying to change things field by field. So it's about saving a specific field. So we are using that save term a lot, and we are not really going to create things, or the way we are going to use the created or the updated are like the user is going to send maybe a command to create something, actually create something, because create is the term that he needs, but sometimes we're going to use something else, and that created or that updated will be kind of a final event saying, okay, everything has been done, but in the middle you have a lot of events that says, okay, this field has been changed, this other field has been saved, etc., etc. And I feel it's really about knowing your business, then being pragmatic about the terms that are actually used, and do not hesitate to use the verbs that your business teams are using.
And you should do it, actually. It's not that, it's good to do it. I think we should do it if we want to respect DDD. Yeah, that's a very good tip. That was a very nice conversation, Laurent. I think we should try to summarize a bit here what we spoke about. So, if I may, so that it means that I understood what you said. So, if I understand, 5 years ago, you tried to do it, to do the even sourcing part yourself, creating your own framework based on very famous technology, Kafka, and it was successful. But you were actually doing kind of even streaming than more than the complete even sourcing style, right? And 3 years after, actually, right? You looked up a bit for Axonic products, and you discovered Axonic. And this is where you could really facilitate putting in place everything, the DDD, CQRS, even sourcing part. And you use the framework for this. You also use the server to facilitate the message routing, which brings the location transparency, and distributed commandos, distributed variables, and all the fancy things. Is it a good summary, Laurent? And of course, the most important thing, now you can focus on, now that you know the principles, now that you know how to configure it, you can focus on creating business values, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah, cool. So that is that could be the conclusion of this very nice conversation. Laurent, thank you very much.
Yeah, and if I could just add one thing.
Yeah,
because there is one thing that I feel really benefited us while building our application. It's event modeling.
Sure. Very interesting topic.
I mean, there is a very interesting site that like if you type event modeling, that's the first thing that is going to come up on Google. And this is a way of designing, modelizing what you're going to do, and it's something that you're going to work with the whole team to do, and that is going to give you a view on all your events, how are they triggered with your command, in which read model are they going to be exposed. And there is also the link with the UX. So it's quite important to have your design team work with you on this.
Yeah.
And this is something that allowed us to think on a more design-oriented way without going into the technicities. And I still have today a couple engineers that are trying to jump inside the code without doing this beforehand. And well, most of the time they fail and they need to take a step back, think about the modelization, and then the code is quite easy to do because you know how everything is going to work together. So yeah, event modeling.
Is it a tip from you that's saying before jumping into the code, try to sit with the business and model the things?
Yeah, and even
using the
even if it's not with the business, like ideally you would do this with the business, but even if it's from a pure technical design point of view, do it because it's going to prove invaluable on the long term.
Definitely. And special tip. Do you use a special product for this? I don't want to do some advertisement, but it's always good to know a bit about what kind of product do you use to do this. Do you use a whiteboard?
We like to use Miro actually to do this, just because the tool is quite easy to manipulate.
Collaborate with other people as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll keep that in mind. Interesting. And do you have some kind of, tips and tricks for event modeling, or I don't know, maybe you went into more details?
Yeah, well, we had our own we have our own version of event modeling now. We started with the let's say the advertised version, but we wanted to have more control and more visibility, for instance, on where commands were being executed by which aggregates. So for instance, instead of having a lane in which you're going to have your commands and your read models, we would just have the commands inside the aggregate or the aggregate members lane.
All right. So it brings the ubiquitous language, it brings a bit the idea of what are the events, what are the commands, but you add for the, let's say, the technical documentation.
Indeed,
So technical, let's say in between business and technical, you add the aggregate, which is actually, so after this, you have a complete view of what to do and what the software is doing.
And then you just have to go through the code, and it's quite easy also to maintain because it's not like you're going to change your flows every day. Well, obviously in the beginning while learning, we were changing this a lot, and this is what brought us this change in our use of event modeling. But it's something that then once things are set, it's not going to change a lot, and adapting it is not going to cost you a lot because it's just adding some parts, some flows, etc. It's actually very well explained on the website that it's something that in terms of evolution, it's not going to be it's going to be a straight line, let's say.
Yeah, so very, very interesting topics. Thank you for this, Laurent. I think we can conclude here. It was a very nice discussion, Laurent. Thank you very much for this. And it was very nice also to understand that AxonIQ helped you a bit with your business and help you to focus on business instead of focusing on technologies.
I could actually also just add one small thing. Because you're talking about how AxonIQ helped us, and I'm just thinking we didn't talk about this. But we have a Slack channel that we are sharing with the AxonIQ team. And this actually proved invaluable because each time we had a question, we could just throw it out in there. And every time we had an answer in the day, someone, not always the same person answering, but often the same person answering. And this was very helpful, and we could even get inside a meet, talk about a specific subject, and we also actually worked with an AxonIQ developer that for a few weeks came to work with us and helped us build our application. And this also proved invaluable when we were starting with new technical aspects of the Axon framework, and that we needed to ramp up on the technical part quite fast. And again, keep the focus on the business.
Yeah, thank you. It was a very interesting point indeed. So I'm really glad that we could be proficient in the support. Again, thank you for this. And yeah, I'll give the message to the team. They will be happy.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Laurent.
Thank you, Frédéric.
I hope to see you in the Axon conference really soon, a few months.
Yeah.
And till then, take care. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Laurent.